My name is Jack Knox. I'm 42 years old and I've spent the last 15 years of my life immersed in the world of supply chain management. Currently, I serve as the Director of Supply Chain Operations at Meridian Logistics, a company that's been my professional home for nearly a decade. Over the years, I've honed my expertise in streamlining complex logistics networks and crafting strategies that not only improve efficiency, but also save millions of dollars annually. But nothing prepared me for the moment when everything I built would be dismissed in a single heartbeat. It started months ago, early in the year, well before the quarterly board meeting that would alter the course of my career. I had been working tirelessly, dissecting every aspect of Meridian's supply chain. I analyzed shipment routes, inventory turnover rates, vendor contracts, and warehouse layouts. I consulted with my team daily, cross-checking data, running simulations, and negotiating with suppliers to find cost-effective alternatives without compromising reliability. The result was a comprehensive plan projected to save the company $4 million over the next 3 years, a strategic overhaul that balanced innovation with practicality. The plan was no small feat. It required coordinated changes across multiple departments, intricate scheduling adjustments, and securing buy-in from key stakeholders, something I painstakingly documented in reports, flowcharts, and email threads. I presented it to my immediate supervisors, who gave cautious but favorable feedback. With their backing, I was confident the board would see the long-term value and approve the initiative. After all, efficiency and cost savings are the lifeblood of logistics. This was my opportunity to showcase the impact of methodical, data-driven leadership. The day of the quarterly board meeting arrived. The room was tense, filled with executives, shareholders, and the CEO, Martin Caldwell. Martin, at 53, was known for his authoritarian style, quick judgments, and a fierce drive to cut costs at any expense. I'd had my disagreements with him before, but I believed that the facts and numbers would speak louder than ego this time. As I stood before the board, I laid out my plan with precision, walking them through projections, risk assessments, and expected outcomes. I saw nods here and there, signs that my logic was sinking in, but then came Martin's reaction. The moment everything shifted, he leaned back, smirking, and interrupted before I could finish. "Absolutely ridiculous," he proclaimed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This plan won't work, Knox. It's impractical, overly complicated, and frankly, a waste of time and resources." His tone was condescending, dismissive, and delivered with unmistakable finality. The room went silent, eyes darting between us, waiting for my response. I felt the sting of betrayal, not just for myself, but for the team and the future I'd envisioned for the company. Yet, beneath the surface, I kept my composure. No raised voice, no defensive stance, just clear, calm resolve. "Understood," I replied evenly. "If you believe that, then I resign. You'll be hearing from me in 5 months." That moment was a crucible, a test of patience and professionalism. As I gathered my things and walked out, I didn't let anger cloud my mind. Instead, I started formulating a calculated response, one built on every documented detail I had meticulously archived. Emails, project timelines, client communications, and system diagrams. I knew the path ahead would be challenging, but I was ready. The real work was just beginning. Over the course of my 15 years at Meridian Logistics, I wasn't just another cog in the machine. I was entrusted with responsibilities that shaped the entire supply chain landscape of the company. Early on, I recognized that incremental tweaks wouldn't be enough to sustain growth in a fiercely competitive industry. I dove deep into the complexities of logistics, understanding that true efficiency required a holistic approach, melding advanced analytics with hands-on operational insight. One of my proudest achievements was leading a multi-year initiative that boosted Meridian's operational efficiency by 22%. This improvement wasn't a flash in the pan. It translated directly into an $8 million annual saving for the company. How did we achieve it? It was a combination of innovative route optimization algorithms, renegotiated vendor agreements, and the implementation of a dynamic inventory management system that reduced both excess stock and costly shortages. The process demanded relentless attention to data, but also a human touch, building trust with vendors, motivating warehouse teams, and aligning cross-functional departments. Beyond these projects, I developed proprietary supply chain models that became foundational to Meridian's operations. These models were more than spreadsheets. They were dynamic frameworks that incorporated variables like seasonal demand fluctuations, geopolitical risks, and fuel price volatility. By integrating these factors, we could forecast potential disruptions weeks in advance and adjust accordingly. I personally authored and maintained detailed documentation on these models, ensuring they could be understood and utilized by the teams, but also secured to protect Meridian's competitive edge. My scope wasn't limited to internal processes. I managed relationships with our top 12 clients, each representing critical revenue streams. Among them was Helix Manufacturing, which held an $8.5 million contract, our largest single client agreement. Maintaining that relationship required constant communication, rapid response to their evolving needs, and ensuring our service levels exceeded expectations. I often coordinated joint operational reviews with their supply chain executives, sharing insights and adapting our approach to their product launch schedules and inventory cycles. Financially, my compensation reflected not only my responsibilities but also my impact. At $118,000 annually, I was well aware that the company viewed my role as a significant investment. Alongside my salary, I had stock options that were set to vest fully over the next 2 years, a testament to the company's initial confidence in my long-term value. I took this seriously, knowing that my contributions needed to justify this trust. Understanding the importance of accountability and future security, I meticulously archived every piece of work related to my role. This included detailed project plans with milestone charts, email threads spanning negotiations and approvals, system architecture diagrams mapping out supply chain networks, and minute-by-minute notes from client meetings. These records were organized within secure digital repositories and backed up regularly. I knew from experience that documentation isn't just about record keeping. It's a tool for transparency and leverage. This archive was more than just a precaution. It was a reflection of my professional ethos. In a field where operational details can often be overlooked, I believed that precision, clarity, and thoroughness were the pillars of sustainable success. Each innovation, each contract adjustment, each risk mitigation plan was captured carefully, ensuring that Meridian could trace decisions back to their origin and understand their rationale. Despite this deep involvement and proven track record, I sensed increasing tension with the upper management. The drive for rapid cost reductions sometimes clashed with the long-term strategic investments I championed. Yet I remained focused on my work, confident that the results would speak for themselves. I never underestimated the value I brought to the table until that fateful board meeting when my plan was dismissed outright. Looking back on those years, the numbers tell part of the story. The millions saved, the contracts secured, the efficiency gains. But behind those figures lies a relentless commitment to detail, a nuanced understanding of complex systems, and the ability to navigate the intricacies of both technology and relationships. Every step I took was deliberate, every document a piece of a larger puzzle. That foundation, my expertise, my documented evidence, and my client relationships became the bedrock for the calculated response I began to craft. I knew that what was dismissed as ridiculous by my CEO was, in fact, a carefully constructed framework that could not only withstand scrutiny, but also stand as a testament to my professional integrity and vision. And so, as I prepared to step away from Meridian, I carried with me not just a plan, but the undeniable proof of my value. Martin Caldwell was the kind of CEO who thrived on control and swift decisions, qualities that once seemed like strengths to shareholders hungry for quick returns, but qualities that masked a dangerous impatience with anything that challenged his authority. At 53, he was under relentless pressure from the board and investors to slash costs and boost short-term profits. The market was unforgiving, and every quarterly report came with raised eyebrows and pointed questions. In that environment, my $118,000 salary and the long-term nature of my $4 million cost-saving plan became targets, not because they lacked merit, but because Martin viewed them as unnecessary expenses draining resources. He didn't see the years of painstaking analysis behind my proposal. What mattered to him was the immediate hit to the bottom line. To him, replacing me with a junior manager who demanded barely over half my salary, $68,000 a year, was a quick win. He saw it as a neat cost-cutting measure, ignoring the complexity that underpinned my role. But what Martin overlooked, or perhaps chose to ignore, was that my expertise was not just about managing inventory or routing trucks. I was the gatekeeper of Meridian's proprietary supply chain algorithms, models that had been developed over years of rigorous iteration, integrating variables such as international trade fluctuations, supplier reliability indices, and fluctuating demand forecasts. These algorithms weren't just software tools, they were the brains behind Meridian's competitive advantage. And critically, the contracts with our top clients, especially the $8.5 million agreement with Helix Manufacturing, were tied intricately to the supply chain performance metrics I oversaw and reported on. Those contracts carried exclusivity clauses and performance guarantees that legally required my direct involvement and oversight. My position wasn't simply operational, it was legally entwined with the company's commitments. Martin's decision to replace me with a junior manager who lacked this institutional knowledge was reckless. The new hire had no experience navigating these complex systems, no access to or understanding of the proprietary models, and no relationship with the clients who depended on stability and precision. This wasn't just a personnel change, it was a systemic risk that Martin refused to acknowledge. The board's pressure to cut costs had blinded him to the operational realities and legal nuances that defined my role. Moreover, Martin failed to consider the fine print of my employment agreement. Unlike typical contracts that contain broad, non-compete clauses, mine was narrowly tailored. It restricted me only from soliciting Meridian's clients for 6 months and confined me to the same geographic region. But it did not prevent me from establishing a new company operating within the same sector, nor did it bar me from using my expertise and proprietary knowledge I had developed independently over my career. This gap in the contract's scope was a strategic opening that I recognized immediately after the board meeting. Faced with this, I knew I needed expert legal counsel. That's when I turned to Ethan Pierce, an employment lawyer and mentor I had trusted for years. Ethan's reputation was built on his deep understanding of employment law, contract negotiations, and strategic litigation in corporate disputes. More importantly, he had a pragmatic approach. He wasn't just about courtroom battles, but about leveraging legal frameworks to maximize business outcomes. When I reached out to him, Ethan didn't just offer legal advice, he became an integral part of my plan, helping me dissect the contract language, identify Meridian's vulnerabilities, and map out a path forward. Together, we began to review every clause, every email, every documented conversation between me and the executive team. Ethan's eyes lit up when he found inconsistencies in Meridian's handling of my stock option vesting schedule and the inadequate severance terms offered after my termination. He pointed out that Meridian had acted in breach of good faith, violating fiduciary duties and potentially exposing the company to regulatory scrutiny. While Martin's ego had led him to dismiss my plan publicly, it was his lack of foresight and disregard for operational continuity that would become the company's undoing. He underestimated not only the technical complexity of my role, but also the legal and relational bonds I had nurtured with clients. I had spent years building trust, understanding their unique supply chain challenges, and customizing solutions that went far beyond standard contracts. Martin's motivation was clear. He wanted to demonstrate decisive leadership and placate shareholders, demanding immediate cost reductions. But in doing so, he triggered a cascade of risks. By sidelining the very expertise that had saved Meridian millions of dollars and secured its largest contracts, he exposed the company to disruptions that extended beyond finances into reputation, client loyalty, and legal compliance. That moment crystallized a profound professional realization for me. Cost-cutting measures devoid of strategic understanding are not just short-sighted, they are dangerous. Martin's approach was emblematic of a broader corporate flaw where leadership prioritizes appearance and immediate gains over sustainable, data-driven decision-making. As I prepared to respond, I was no longer just an employee who had been dismissed. I became a strategist armed with years of meticulously documented work, legal insight, and a clear understanding of Meridian's operational dependencies. Martin Caldwell had made a critical oversight, not just in underestimating my value, but in failing to grasp the binding complexities that governed the supply chain and client relationships. With Ethan's guidance, I began to outline a plan that wouldn't just contest my termination, but would hold Meridian accountable for the systemic risks they were inviting. I knew that my non-compete clause's narrow scope was a foothold, a chance to build a new venture that could challenge Meridian's dominance and protect the clients they now endangered. Martin's ambition to replace me with a cheaper, less experienced manager was a gamble, but it was one I was ready to counter with strategic precision, leveraging every documented detail, every contractual nuance, and every client relationship I had cultivated over the last decade and a half. The game was on, and I was prepared to play it on my terms. After the board meeting, as I sat alone in my office, the weight of Martin Caldwell's dismissal settled in, but my mind was already shifting gears. I carefully opened the termination package, determined to dissect every clause and gauge the true implications. The severance offer sat glaringly on the first page, presented as a fait accompli, but the fine print revealed glaring omissions. Most notably, my vested stock options, something that should have been a guaranteed part of my compensation, were excluded entirely. It was a clear attempt to cut costs at my expense and to erase any lingering claim I might have on Meridian's future successes. But the exclusion of stock options was just the beginning. More troubling was the outright dismissal of any claims I might have had regarding the intellectual property I developed over my years at the company. The proprietary supply chain algorithms and models, the very backbone of Meridian's operational efficiencies, were being written off as company-owned without acknowledgement of my direct contributions and ownership of the frameworks I had painstakingly built. It was as if the company wanted to pretend those years of innovation never happened, or worse, to appropriate my work without recompense. I didn't let anger cloud my judgment as I sifted through the dense legal language. Instead, I began cross-referencing every relevant document I had archived over my career: project proposals, email exchanges with executives, system architecture diagrams, and client contracts. It was a detailed forensic exercise, and the evidence was crystal clear. Meridian was not only trying to marginalize my contributions, but also positioning itself precariously in terms of legal compliance and operational stability. Digging into internal email threads, I uncovered a series of messages between Martin and his executive team that confirmed my suspicions. The tone was dismissive, almost cavalier, concerning the transition plan following my departure. The emails revealed an aggressive push to fast-track my replacement, with little regard for the complex technical dependencies or the contractual obligations tied to my role. I read lines where executives acknowledged the risk of supply chain disruptions, but prefaced it as a price worth paying for immediate payroll reductions. What struck me most was how little consideration was given to the compliance clauses embedded within our client contracts. These clauses mandated exclusive oversight and operational continuity that, by company policy, only someone with my level of access and knowledge could maintain. Yet, the leadership intended to hand over the reins to an inexperienced junior manager without any substantial transition plan. It was reckless, a ticking time bomb disguised as cost savings. Turning to the supply chain architecture diagrams I had created and maintained, I painstakingly walked through each node, each data flow, and every integration point. These weren't just technical blueprints. They were the lifelines connecting Meridian's warehouses, vendors, transportation networks, and client fulfillment centers. Without the proprietary algorithms I had developed to dynamically optimize routing and inventory levels, the entire system was vulnerable to inefficiencies and failures. I realized the severity of the implications. Meridian's operational health depended heavily on the intellectual property and team relationships that I embodied. Without my stewardship, not only would performance metrics suffer, but the company risked breaching service-level agreements with top clients, agreements that carried legal weight and potential financial penalties. Throughout this meticulous review, I felt no bitterness, only a growing clarity. Every piece of evidence, every documented conversation, and every contractual clause lined up to paint a picture of corporate negligence and potential breaches of fiduciary duty by Meridian's leadership. Their decision wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a strategic misstep that endangered the company's future. I began mapping out the leverage points, the wrongful exclusion of vested stock options, the dismissal of my intellectual property claims, and the violation of contractual compliance with key clients. These were not just grievances. They were actionable breaches that could form the foundation for a legal and professional challenge. As I laid out these elements side by side, the path ahead became clear. This wasn't going to be an emotional reaction. It was going to be a calculated, methodical response, one that would hold Meridian accountable for their reckless decisions and protect the clients and systems they were jeopardizing. In that moment, the initial sting of rejection transformed into strategic resolve. The pieces were in place, I just needed to execute. When I reached out to Ethan Pierce, it wasn't on a whim. I knew I needed someone with deep expertise in employment law and a sharp understanding of corporate contracts, and importantly, someone who could think strategically, not just reactively. Ethan had been a trusted advisor over the years, quietly guiding me through tricky negotiations and contract reviews. I trusted him to help me unravel the tangled mess Meridian had left behind and to spot every legal nuance that could work in my favor. Our first meeting was intense, but focused. Ethan arrived with a stack of legal textbooks, printouts of my employment contract, termination paperwork, and a flash drive containing all the documents I'd painstakingly archived. I laid out the situation from start to finish: the dismissal, the flawed severance offer, the proprietary models, and the critical client contracts. Ethan listened closely, nodding as I detailed the complex supply chain architecture and the exclusivity clauses binding Meridian to my oversight. He understood immediately that this wasn't a simple employment dispute. It was a multi-layered situation involving intellectual property rights, breach of contract, and potential regulatory violations. Together, we began constructing a comprehensive inventory of evidence. The first step was to gather every email exchange that related to my role, from daily operational coordination to strategic discussions with the board. These email chains painted a detailed picture of my leadership and involvement in critical decisions, as well as the dismissive attitude from upper management toward my proposals and warnings. Ethan pointed out specific emails where Martin Caldwell's directives contradicted internal policies or contractual obligations, a key element for demonstrating bad faith. Next, we delved into system access logs, digital records showing exactly which proprietary algorithms and models I had developed and maintained, and when. These logs highlighted that only I had administrative privileges over these critical components, underscoring the operational risk Meridian was taking by abruptly replacing me. It also reinforced the argument that the new manager lacked the technical authority and knowledge to maintain system integrity. We then catalogued client correspondence, especially communications with Meridian's top clients like Helix Manufacturing. These emails documented my direct involvement in managing their service requirements, addressing concerns, and negotiating contract renewals. The exclusivity clauses within these contracts explicitly mandated my oversight of service delivery and supply chain performance, which Meridian was now jeopardizing. Ethan emphasized how these clauses could be leveraged to challenge Meridian's attempts to transfer client responsibilities without my consent. Financial projections and forecasts were another critical piece. I shared detailed reports showing how my supply chain optimization plans were projected to save millions over the next few years, along with risk assessments outlining potential losses if those plans were disrupted. Ethan pointed out that these projections could support claims of future damages resulting from Meridian's reckless replacement of my role. We also secured statements from 3 senior colleagues who had worked closely with me, testimonies that confirmed my leadership role, the unique knowledge I possessed, and the operational risks brought on by the sudden transition. Their accounts added weight to our case, providing credible third-party validation that went beyond dry documents. Throughout this process, I made sure to back up every piece of proprietary data, algorithms, system blueprints, workflow diagrams, in multiple secure locations. I knew that safeguarding these assets was crucial, both for legal leverage and for the future of any new venture I might launch. Ethan advised on best practices for digital evidence preservation, ensuring nothing could be challenged on grounds of tampering or incompleteness. Meanwhile, we analyzed the market landscape to identify where Meridian's disruption would create opportunities. Ethan and I discussed how the combination of legal pressure and client dissatisfaction could open doors for a competing firm to offer superior service. especially if I maintained the intellectual property and client relationships that Meridian was about to lose. In the quiet moments, I reflected on the broader strategy. This wasn't just about responding to a wrongful termination. It was about carefully calculated timing, precision in evidence presentation, and leveraging every contractual and operational detail to build an unassailable position. Ethan's pragmatic counsel reminded me that emotional reactions would only cloud judgment. Success hinged on methodical execution. I kept reminding myself, their ignorance of my IP rights and client relationships will be their undoing. Timing and precision will define success. With Ethan's guidance, our plan began to take shape, a layered approach intertwining legal action, regulatory complaints, and discreet client outreach. Every document was a weapon, every email a thread pulling Meridian's facade apart. This phase of gathering evidence and building the foundation of our case was exhausting but necessary. Each discovery, each cross-reference, brought clarity and a growing sense of empowerment. The narrative of betrayal and dismissal was no longer just a personal story. It was a professional indictment supported by facts, law, and strategic foresight. As the days passed, I felt the momentum shift. The calculated response I had envisioned after the board meeting was evolving into a formidable campaign. Meridian's oversight, their cavalier dismissal of complexities in my role, was about to meet the precision of legal scrutiny and professional challenge. The pieces were aligning and the tide was turning. Ethan and I dove deep into the mountain of evidence I'd collected over the years: contracts, emails, system logs, financial reports, piecing together a legal and professional narrative that would expose Meridian's missteps in brutal clarity. What stood out immediately were multiple contractual breaches that, taken together, painted a damning picture of the company's disregard not just for my rights, but for the operational and legal framework that sustained their business. First, the wrongful withholding of my vested stock options was a glaring violation. According to my employment agreement, a portion of my stock options had fully vested prior to my termination, assets that should have been mine regardless of the circumstances. Meridian's severance offer, however, conveniently excluded these. Ethan explained that this wasn't just an oversight, it was a breach of contract and potentially a violation of securities regulations. We knew this claim alone could form the backbone of a financial damages suit, but it was only the beginning. Next came the unauthorized transfer of client contracts. I had exclusive oversight and direct management responsibilities over the company's largest clients, including Helix Manufacturing, whose $8.5 million contract accounted for a significant chunk of Meridian's revenue. These contracts contained strict clauses binding Meridian to maintain consistent service levels and client relationship management, often requiring personal involvement from someone with my expertise. To simply hand these responsibilities off to a junior manager without the proper knowledge or experience wasn't just reckless, it was legally questionable. Ethan pointed out that some contracts had explicit non-transferability clauses or mandated client consent before reassignment. Meridian's attempt to bypass these contractual safeguards exposed them to breach of contract claims and potential penalties. Perhaps most critically, we uncovered clear violations of the non-compete clause terms. While my contract included a non-compete provision, it was narrowly tailored, restricting me from soliciting Meridian's clients only for 6 months and within a limited geographic radius. Importantly, it did not prevent me from operating a new business in the logistics sector or leveraging my own intellectual property, which I had developed independently over many years. This created a legal opening for me to challenge Meridian's attempts to limit my post-employment activities unfairly. Ethan was confident this nuance would protect my right to launch a competing firm without fear of frivolous injunctions or lawsuits. We also scrutinized the operational impact Meridian's decisions would inevitably cause. The technical diagrams I'd created illustrated how deeply integrated my proprietary supply chain algorithms were within the company's daily operations. They weren't mere tools, they were lifelines. Without the ongoing stewardship and system access only I possessed, the risk of significant supply chain disruptions was imminent. Ethan advised that this operational dependency, coupled with the company's reckless replacement of key personnel, could constitute a breach of fiduciary duty toward clients and shareholders alike. To strengthen our position, we prepared formal regulatory complaints to submit to the Department of Commerce. These complaints detailed Meridian's violations of contractual obligations, potential securities infractions related to stock option handling, and the risks posed to client service levels due to management negligence. We knew regulatory scrutiny could add weight to our legal claims and increase pressure on Meridian's leadership. Parallel to our legal preparations, I began discreet outreach to key clients. I approached these conversations with utmost professionalism. No disparagement, only factual reminders of the operational continuity and reliability my involvement guaranteed. I emphasized my firm's readiness to ensure uninterrupted service quality, knowing that trust and reputation were the currency that could tip the balance in my favor. This client engagement was delicate. I had to navigate carefully to avoid violating non-solicitation clauses while planting seeds of confidence in Knox Supply Solutions. Throughout this phase, Ethan's counsel was invaluable. He stressed the importance of meticulous documentation, encouraging me to capture every interaction, every client inquiry, and every correspondence with Meridian's management. This procedural rigor wasn't just about building a case, it was about preserving credibility and professionalism amid a volatile situation. I maintained a neutral, almost detached tone in all communications, resisting any impulses toward retaliation or emotional outbursts. As we wrapped up this stage, the scope of Meridian's legal exposure became undeniable. The combination of contractual breaches, operational risks, and regulatory violations formed a comprehensive case that could not be easily dismissed. Our strategy was clear: to leverage these multiple fronts simultaneously: legal claims, regulatory pressure, and client relationships, to create a force Meridian couldn't counteract with mere cost-cutting rhetoric. I realized then that this wasn't just about reclaiming what was owed. It was about holding a corporation accountable for its reckless decisions and protecting the very clients whose interests had been jeopardized. The convergence of legal, financial, and operational elements made the challenge complex, but also gave me a unique advantage. With Ethan's expertise and my detailed archives, we were ready to take the fight beyond the boardroom and into a broader arena of corporate governance and justice. This phase was exhausting: endless hours reviewing documents, drafting letters, and coordinating with potential witnesses, but each step brought a sense of empowerment. The calculated calm I had maintained since that fateful board meeting kept me steady. I wasn't just reacting, I was executing a strategic response that would shape the next chapters of this battle. And so, with a comprehensive legal arsenal assembled and the first discreet client conversations underway, the next phase of our challenge was set in motion. A multi-pronged campaign designed to turn Meridian's miscalculations into undeniable leverage. The stakes were high, but the path was clear. After months of meticulous preparation and countless late nights poring over contracts, emails, and system blueprints, I finally took the formal step. I tendered my resignation from Meridian Logistics. It wasn't a decision made lightly, but by that point, it was clear my path within the company had been irrevocably severed. What I needed was a new beginning, one where my expertise and vision could drive real results without being dismissed or undermined. The very next day, I launched Knox Supply Solutions, a company built on the foundations of the proprietary supply chain models and client relationships I had cultivated over my 15 years in the industry. Securing office space wasn't a simple matter of convenience. It was strategic. I found a modest yet professional suite just a few blocks away from Meridian's headquarters. The location served a dual purpose, allowing me proximity to the pulse of the industry and signaling to clients and competitors alike that Knox Supply Solutions was a serious contender. The space wasn't flashy, it was functional and efficient, with room enough for the small team I planned to build. Every detail, from the furniture layout to the network infrastructure, was chosen to reflect professionalism and readiness. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. This was my chance to build something new, with the precision and care that had been absent in my previous role's final chapter. Parallel to setting up the new firm, Ethan Pierce and I finalized the legal notices we were about to serve to Meridian and Martin Caldwell personally. These weren't mere formalities. They were deliberate, carefully worded documents that articulated our grievances clearly. The notices outlined Meridian's breach of contract, improper withholding of vested stock options, and violation of intellectual property rights. More importantly, they highlighted the operational risks introduced by the company's reckless leadership decisions, risks that jeopardize not only the supply chain, but also the client's obligations and expectations. Serving these notices was a calculated move, intended to establish an official record and put Meridian on immediate legal notice that their actions would not go unchallenged. With the legal groundwork laid, I turned my focus to the clients, those critical relationships that had been so precariously endangered by Meridian's misguided leadership. I initiated discreet outreach to Helix Manufacturing and 2 other top-tier clients. These communications were conducted with utmost professionalism and care. I didn't disparage Meridian. Instead, I emphasized the risks they now faced under new management, pointing out the complexities of the supply chain systems and the proprietary knowledge required to maintain continuous service levels. I framed Knox Supply Solutions as a steady, reliable partner ready to provide seamless transition support should they need it. The tone was neutral yet confident, aimed at reassuring clients that I was not just an alternative, but a guardian of stability and reliability. Meanwhile, Meridian, seemingly unaware of the storm brewing, proceeded with onboarding my replacement. This junior manager, inexperienced with the intricate systems and lacking the client relationships I had fostered, was being thrust into a role fraught with operational landmines. I watched this development carefully, documenting every transition step and communication. My own communications with Meridian's management remained measured and professional. Despite the tension, I refrained from any overt hostility or emotional outbursts. Every message, every phone call was archived, preserving a record that could prove invaluable in the upcoming legal battles. Behind the scenes, I and Ethan continued to build a network of support. I secured witness statements from senior colleagues who had recognized the critical nature of my role and the risks of the abrupt leadership change. These testimonies supplemented our documentation and painted a fuller picture of the professional negligence Meridian was demonstrating. We also backed up every shred of proprietary data, the algorithms, system designs, and operational workflows, ensuring that Knox Supply Solutions would hold an unassailable position of technical and intellectual authority. As the weeks progressed, the trap was carefully set. Meridian was now legally encumbered, operationally vulnerable, and increasingly under the gaze of clients who were beginning to question the wisdom of their decisions. Knox Supply Solutions stood ready, positioned to offer stability in a sea of uncertainty. The convergence of legal notices, client outreach, and operational insight created a multi-layered challenge that Meridian's leadership was ill-prepared to face. In those moments, I returned often to the internal mantra that had sustained me. Success would come not from anger or confrontation, but from strategic calm, methodical execution, and unshakable professionalism. The groundwork had been laid. The next moves would test the resilience of both Meridian and myself, but I was ready. The story was far from over. It was barely 2 months since I officially resigned and launched Knox Supply Solutions, yet the repercussions of my departure at Meridian Logistics were already rippling through the company's operations. Almost immediately, the cracks began to show as Meridian's new supply chain systems, hurriedly implemented under the direction of the junior manager Martin Caldwell had installed, started to falter in ways no one had fully anticipated. The first signs were subtle: minor delays in shipment schedules, slight mismatches in inventory counts, and occasional discrepancies in order fulfillment. But within weeks, these small issues snowballed into more significant problems. Inventory shortages arose unexpectedly, warehouses reported stockouts on critical components, and shipments were delayed across several major distribution routes. For a company that prided itself on precision and reliability, this was alarming. Client complaints began to trickle in, then steadily grew. Customer service logs showed an uptick in dissatisfaction reports from key accounts. Helix Manufacturing, Meridian's largest client and the $8.5 million contract holder, was among the first to express concern. Their supply chain executives reached out directly to Meridian's account managers, seeking explanations for delayed deliveries and inconsistent inventory availability. The frustration was palpable in their communications. Their manufacturing schedules depended heavily on Meridian's timely and accurate logistics services, But Helix wasn't content to wait for explanations. A meeting was swiftly convened, and I learned that they had requested a strategic discussion with Knox Supply Solutions. It was clear they were exploring alternative partnerships that could guarantee the stability their operations desperately needed. I prepared for this meeting with the same professionalism and thoroughness I applied to every client interaction, ready to demonstrate that Knox Supply Solutions wasn't just a fallback option, but a superior and reliable partner. Meanwhile, Caldwell's desperation became more evident. Word reached me that he had attempted to reach out through intermediaries, proposing that I provide consulting assistance to help stabilize Meridian's faltering supply chain. His overture was not only a tacit admission of the chaos his leadership had unleashed, but also a tacit attempt to patch his mistakes without acknowledging fault. I declined firmly, making sure my refusal was well documented to avoid any future misinterpretation or claims of tacit agreement. Simultaneously, our legal complaints against Meridian began gaining traction. The Department of Commerce acknowledged receipt of our filings and initiated preliminary inquiries into Meridian's compliance with client contract obligations and employment law violations. While these investigations were just beginning, the mounting regulatory scrutiny added pressure on Meridian's executive team and the board of directors. Inside the boardroom, tension grew palpable. Executives and shareholders expressed growing doubts about Caldwell's decisions, particularly his dismissal of my expertise and the subsequent operational disruptions. Internal emails leaked, some captured through less formal channels, revealed the board's frustration with Caldwell's leadership and their concern over the potential loss of critical accounts. Client dissatisfaction translated directly into financial risk, threatening Meridian's bottom line and stock valuation. Throughout this turbulent period, I maintained a professional demeanor and meticulous documentation of every interaction. Emails exchanged with former colleagues, client inquiries, and regulatory communications were archived with care. I was careful to avoid any language that could be construed as disparaging or retaliatory. Instead, my correspondence was factual and focused on the systemic issues emerging from Meridian's leadership missteps. As complaints mounted and operational failures became more frequent, Meridian's reputation began to erode. Competitors watched closely, sensing an opportunity, while clients started evaluating their options. The contrast between Knox Supply Solutions' proactive stability and Meridian's growing chaos became increasingly stark. I reflected often on how swiftly calculated dismissal of expertise and reliance on inexperienced management had destabilized an operation that once ran like clockwork. The irony was not lost on me that the very plan Caldwell derided as absolutely ridiculous was designed to prevent exactly this kind of systemic failure. With Helix Manufacturing's scheduled meeting looming, I knew the next few weeks would be critical. The seeds I'd planted through careful legal positioning and client outreach were beginning to bear fruit, but the challenge ahead still demanded patience, precision, and unwavering professionalism. The situation was escalating, and Meridian's leadership was clearly scrambling to contain the fallout, yet unaware that the real reckoning was just getting started. Simultaneously, as Meridian's operational cracks widened, Ethan and I advanced the legal front with deliberate precision. We filed a formal lawsuit demanding $1.2 million in unpaid severance and damages for breach of contract. This figure wasn't arbitrary. It was the sum of my vested stock options improperly withheld, combined with estimated losses tied to Meridian's reckless termination and contract mismanagement. Our complaint detailed how the company flagrantly ignored clauses guaranteeing my compensation and intellectual property rights, and how this breach directly threatened my professional standing and financial security. Filing the lawsuit was a pivotal moment, a public declaration that our meticulously documented grievances were not mere threats, but actionable claims. It was a strategic escalation designed to jolt Meridian's executives and shareholders into recognizing the gravity of their decisions. The legal papers, heavy with evidence and precise language, left no room for ambiguity. Every breach was substantiated by contracts, email exchanges, and system records that I had painstakingly archived over the years. This wasn't about petty retaliation. It was about holding the company accountable for a recklessness that imperiled more than just my career. Almost immediately after filing, the Department of Commerce acknowledged receipt of our regulatory complaints and launched a formal investigation into Meridian's compliance practices. These inquiries focused on the unauthorized transfer of client contracts, especially the Helix manufacturing agreement, and potential violations of fiduciary duty that endangered client interests. The regulatory scrutiny added a new layer of pressure on Meridian, one that reverberated through boardrooms and legal departments alike. I knew that regulatory compliance was a critical vulnerability for Meridian, and the investigation would uncover systemic failures that management had tried to conceal. Meanwhile, the most significant client, Helix Manufacturing, formally signed an $8.5 million service agreement with Knox Supply Solutions. This was more than a business win. It was a clear signal that our professional rigor and commitment to operational stability resonated deeply with clients shaken by Meridian's mismanagement. The contract was structured with stringent performance benchmarks, reflecting both Helix's desire for reliability and their confidence in our proprietary supply chain models. Landing this deal within 5 months of my resignation was a testament not only to the strength of my professional relationships, but also to the strategic advantage our firm held by preserving intimate knowledge of critical operational frameworks. Martin Caldwell's response to these developments was telling. Behind closed doors, he attempted multiple settlement overtures, including offers to reinstate me, but under restrictive terms that would have severely limited my autonomy and ability to leverage my expertise. These proposals felt like thinly veiled attempts to contain the fallout without addressing the fundamental mismanagement that triggered it. I declined calmly but firmly, aware that accepting such conditions would undermine the very principles and freedoms I was fighting to protect. My reply was brief and measured. My lawyers will be in touch. No anger, no negotiation, just professional resolve that underscored my confidence in the strength of our case. The convergence of legal action, regulatory investigation, and client defections created a decisive momentum that Meridian's leadership struggled to counter. The combined effect struck at the heart of their operational credibility and financial stability. Meridian was no longer just grappling with internal turmoil. They faced external scrutiny and tangible losses that imperiled their market position. The courtroom battles, regulatory probes, and shifting client loyalties unfolded simultaneously, amplifying each other's impact. Through it all, I maintained a disciplined approach. Each email, each formal correspondence, and every meeting was conducted with methodical professionalism. I avoided emotional entanglements, focusing instead on the facts and the strategic implications of every development. My communications, carefully archived, contributed to a transparent narrative that further solidified our legal and professional standing. In these challenging weeks, I saw how power dynamics shifted. The arrogance that had dismissed my expertise was meeting the immutable force of contractual and legal accountability. The very detailed documentation I had cultivated over years became an unassailable fortress, turning Meridian's oversight into a liability. Our carefully orchestrated legal and professional campaign was no longer a quiet response to betrayal. It had become a decisive movement that would redefine the landscape of responsibility and integrity in our industry. Amid the mounting pressure, one thing was clear. The battle had escalated beyond individual grievances. It was now a confrontation between strategic competence and reckless leadership, between documented expertise and short-sighted cost-cutting. Meridian's fate was entwined with the outcome, but so too was my own professional legacy. The next phases promised further challenges, but armed with evidence, legal backing, and client trust, I was prepared to navigate them with the same calculated calm that had defined every step so far. The ripple effects of Meridian's missteps soon reached a breaking point. Shareholders, once placated by Caldwell's promises of quick cost reductions, grew restless and vocal as the company's operational failures mounted. Internal reports, initially suppressed, leaked to investors, detailing repeated service disruptions, client dissatisfaction, and mounting financial risks tied directly to the abrupt leadership change. The pressure on Caldwell intensified rapidly. Behind closed doors, the board convened emergency sessions. The mood was grim. Executives wrestled with the undeniable truth that the CEO's cost-cutting gambit had backfired spectacularly. The company faced not only the loss of a marquee client, Helix Manufacturing's $8.5 million contract, now secured by my new firm, but also the looming threat of regulatory penalties and legal liabilities stemming from breaches of contract and employment disputes. The Department of Commerce's investigation, initially a quiet inquiry, escalated swiftly. Its findings painted a damning portrait of Meridian's disregard for contractual compliance and fiduciary duties. The $2.3 million fine levied against Meridian was more than a financial blow. It was a public censure that shook investor confidence and rattled the company's reputation in industry circles. Media outlets picked up on the story, framing it as a cautionary tale of corporate hubris and mismanagement. Within Meridian, morale plummeted. Employees, many of whom had worked closely with me and recognized the value of the systems and relationships I'd built, witnessed firsthand the consequences of Caldwell's reckless decisions. Several staffers confidentially approached me or my legal team, sharing accounts of mismanagement and expressing concern about the company's direction. Their testimonies added weight to the growing narrative of systemic failure. The shareholder revolt reached a crescendo. A vote of no confidence in Caldwell's leadership was called. The board, under immense pressure from major stakeholders, moved decisively to remove him from his post. The announcement was swift and unambiguous. Caldwell was ousted as CEO, an ignominious end to a tenure marked by short-sighted decisions and erosion of trust. Financially, Meridian was reeling. The company's stock price tumbled as investors reacted to the mounting losses and regulatory sanctions. The 15% revenue decline wasn't just a statistic. It reflected cancelled contracts, delayed shipments, and damaged client relationships. The operational instability caused by the leadership upheaval had tangible, measurable consequences that extended far beyond balance sheets, yet the fallout didn't stop there. In the weeks following Caldwell's removal, more employees stepped forward with grievances, many echoing my own experience of being sidelined and dismissed despite demonstrated value. These revelations uncovered a broader pattern of mismanagement and disregard for professional expertise within Meridian's upper echelons. The company found itself embroiled in multiple legal disputes and regulatory probes, each casting a longer shadow over its future. The industry at large took notice. Trade publications and logistics forums dissected Meridian's downfall, scrutinizing Caldwell's leadership style and the company's governance failures. His professional reputation, once respected, suffered irreparable damage. Notably, the National Logistics Association revoked his professional licensure, citing ethical lapses and failure to uphold industry standards. This public sanction was a blow that reverberated beyond corporate walls into Caldwell's personal life. Personal consequences compounded professional ones. Word spread of Caldwell's protracted divorce proceedings, a highly public affair exacerbated by the financial and reputational turmoil. The combination of career collapse and personal strife painted a portrait of a man undone by his own miscalculations and hubris. Meanwhile, Knox Supply Solutions, my newly established firm, was gaining momentum. The market recognized our commitment to operational excellence, reliability, and client-focused service. Our early successes, anchored by the Helix Manufacturing contract, bolstered our credibility and attracted attention from other clients disillusioned by Meridian's decline. We steadily expanded, building a team aligned with the values of professionalism, meticulousness, and strategic foresight that had guided me all along. The growth wasn't just quantitative, it was qualitative. Every contract signed, every client retained, underscored a trust earned through demonstrated competence and consistent delivery. Industry peers took note that underestimating documented expertise wasn't just a misstep, it was a strategic failure. Meridian's collapse became a case study in how arrogance and short-term thinking can unravel even well-established companies. For me, this period was a vindication of years of dedication and the power of strategic calm in the face of adversity. The professional destruction of Caldwell and the unraveling of Meridian's previous dominance underscored the importance of methodical, evidence-based leadership. The consequences of their choices were severe and systemic, but they also reaffirmed the value of integrity, preparation, and patience. As Knox Supply Solutions steadily carved out its place in the logistics landscape, the lessons were clear. Success is built not on ego or impulsive cost-cutting, but on respect for complexity, contractual rigor, and the trust cultivated through transparent and competent stewardship. The road ahead promised new challenges, but with the foundation we had laid, the path was set for sustainable growth and professional fulfillment. The courtroom was tense, the atmosphere charged with anticipation as our case unfolded layer by layer. When the judge finally rendered the verdict, it was a decisive moment, an affirmation of the painstaking documentation and unassailable evidence we had compiled over months. I was awarded $1.5 million in combined severance pay, damages, and stock option compensation. That figure wasn't just a number. It was a recognition of the years of contribution Meridian had tried to erase, a formal acknowledgement that their treatment of me had been not only unjust, but legally indefensible. This victory was more than personal recompense. It sent ripples through Meridian's leadership and the broader logistics community. Regulatory agencies had already taken notice of Meridian's mismanagement, and their investigation culminated in a hefty $2.3 million fine levied against the company. The fine was a public censure, reflecting the severity of Meridian's violations of contractual obligations and fiduciary duties toward their clients. It was a resounding message. Corporate negligence and reckless disregard for operational integrity would not be tolerated. The regulatory findings laid bare Meridian's disregard for contract compliance, particularly the unauthorized transfer of key client agreements and the mishandling of intellectual property rights. Industry insiders whispered of the damage to Meridian's brand reputation as news spread through trade publications and professional networks. This wasn't a quiet reprimand. It was a spotlight exposing systemic failures at the highest levels of management. Among the most significant professional consequences was the board's decision to force Martin Caldwell out as CEO. The shareholder revolt, fueled by mounting losses, regulatory penalties, and client defections, made his position untenable. Caldwell's removal was swift and unequivocal, an unmistakable statement that leadership failures would carry real consequences. His once formidable image was fractured, his authority eroded by the fallout from decisions that prioritized short-term savings over sustainable operations. Beyond the courtroom and boardroom, the ripple effects extended deeper. Several former Meridian employees came forward, sharing stories that echoed my own: sidelined expertise, ignored warnings, and a culture that valued cost-cutting over competence. Their testimonies added weight to the narrative of mismanagement, revealing a troubling pattern that compounded Meridian's vulnerabilities. These disclosures intensified regulatory scrutiny and fueled further legal challenges, making it clear that Meridian's troubles were systemic rather than isolated. Industry associations reacted swiftly. The National Logistics Association, noting Caldwell's ethical lapses and failure to uphold professional standards, revoked his licensure. This sanction wasn't merely symbolic. It severed his professional standing and diminished his influence within the field. The public censure was a professional rebuke that echoed beyond Meridian, signaling to all executives the risks of disregarding operational and contractual responsibilities. Caldwell's professional downfall was mirrored by personal upheaval. The ongoing divorce proceedings, already complicated, became more acrimonious amid the public scrutiny of his career troubles. Financial strain from legal fees, penalties, and lost income compounded the situation, painting a portrait of a man whose decisions had cost him far more than a job. Meanwhile, NOC Supply Solutions was gaining momentum, building a reputation as a dependable and innovative logistics partner. The $8.5 million Helix manufacturing contract was just the beginning. Soon, other clients seeking stability and professionalism gravitated toward us. Our team grew steadily, bound by a shared commitment to precision and strategic foresight. Every contract signed and every successful delivery underscored a professional narrative sharply contrasting with Meridian's decline. Competitors and industry analysts took note. The case became a cautionary tale about underestimating documented expertise and the perils of disregarding contractual and operational complexity. NOC Supply Solutions' rapid rise illustrated how professional integrity and strategic calm could translate into tangible market success. The industry was watching closely, learning lessons from Meridian's failures and our methodical, evidence-based approach. This chapter reaffirmed for me the power of rigorous preparation, measured patience, and steadfast professionalism. The court's judgment, regulatory penalties, and industry sanctions were not just victories. They were validations of a career built on trust, transparency, and expertise. The story was far from over. The professional landscape was shifting, but armed with the hard-won fruits of our efforts, I was poised to navigate what came next, with the same calculated resolve that had defined every step of this journey. 5 months after I handed in my resignation, Knox Supply Solutions was no longer just an idea. It had become a thriving and respected firm. I recall the exact moment when the CEO of our largest client called me to confirm a renewal deal that not only doubled my previous salary, but also included an equity stake in the company. The terms were clear: $150,000 annual draw, accompanied by shares that aligned my success directly with the firm's growth. It was the kind of professional vindication that transcended numbers. It was a testament to strategic patience, unwavering dedication, and the meticulous groundwork laid well before stepping out on my own. Walking into our modest yet efficiently organized office each morning filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. The space buzzed quietly with the focused energy of our growing team, 25 talented professionals, each bringing a unique skill set to the table. I had deliberately chosen each member for their analytical acumen, operational expertise, and shared commitment to integrity. Together, we managed supply chain solutions for clients whose collective annual spending now surpassed $22 million, a remarkable foothold in a competitive market in such a short period. Reflecting on this journey, I realized the pivotal role that rigorous documentation and contract literacy played in shaping our success. It wasn't just about having the right data. It was about knowing how to use it strategically. Every email chain, every system diagram, every client negotiation archive during my tenure at Meridian became an invaluable asset. This trove of meticulously maintained records was the foundation upon which we built our credibility. It allowed us to demonstrate unassailable operational continuity and to reassure clients that their supply chains were in capable, experienced hands. But beyond the paperwork, this experience underscored an even deeper truth: the power of measured patience and strategic calm in the face of public humiliation. When Martin Caldwell publicly dismissed my plan as absolutely ridiculous, it would have been easy to respond with anger or rash decisions. Instead, I chose restraint, not out of submission, but out of confidence in a long game built on professionalism and evidence. That calm resolve allowed me to channel disappointment into strategic action, rather than letting emotion cloud judgment. I learned that professional competence is not simply about technical skill, but about mastering the subtle art of timing, knowing when to push, when to pause, and when to let the inevitable consequences of poor leadership unfold. The market is unforgiving, but it rewards those who prepare meticulously and act decisively when the opportunity arises. My firm's signing of the $8.5 million contract with Helix Manufacturing was more than a business win. It was a clear signal that precision and integrity can outlast ego and short-sightedness. This journey also reinforced the importance of building relationships grounded in trust and transparency. My approach with clients was never transactional. It was collaborative. I engaged them through candid conversations about risks, operational realities, and long-term solutions. That authenticity differentiated Knox Supply Solutions. In a crowded and often impersonal industry, it became a competitive advantage that no cost-cutting measure at Meridian could replicate. Now, leading a growing team, I reflect often on how strategic, calm, and methodical professionalism can transform setbacks into opportunities. The public humiliation I endured was painful but temporary. What endured was the systematic justice that corporate governance and legal frameworks can deliver when wielded wisely. I am not vindicated by revenge, but by the clear acknowledgement of value earned through expertise, diligence, and unwavering integrity. The road ahead will undoubtedly present new challenges: market shifts, client demands, and technological evolution. Yet, with a firm foundation built on rigorous preparation and ethical leadership, I am confident Knox Supply Solutions can navigate whatever comes next. More than a personal triumph, this chapter is a testament to the power of professionalism, and strategic foresight in transforming adversity into lasting success. And as I look out over the city skyline from our office window, I know this is only the beginning of a new era, one defined not by what was lost, but by the enduring principles that guide us forward.